Mr. Carson, hello. Goodness
How are you?
me.
Long time no see, mate.
It
Long time
has
no
been.
see.
It has been. How are
Mm.
you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Your good self.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. What time is it for you?
It is midday.
That's very civilized. That's very
Not too bad at
civilized.
all.
Yes.
Time for some lunch. Be it Ramadan. But
Well,
you doing yourself? You good?
yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well. Yeah, yeah.
Good. Good, good, good. Good.
Um,
Oh, it's been a long time, isn't it? Wouldn't like to
it
think how many
has.
years that's been now, Chris.
Um, Alex, when did I
A
think
decade anyway.
it has been a decade. It
Mm.
has. And you're looking
Almost,
good
yeah.
for it. You're looking
Thank you
good
very
for
much. And likewise,
it.
likewise.
So
Thank you.
obviously the sun is
I do prefer the sun to the rain, I must say. I know you've had a lot of it in the UK recently, haven't you?
yeah, yeah. To
Mm.
here, hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Morning, Chris. Morning,
Morning,
everyone.
morning. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Got a few more people
Yes.
joining. Hi, everyone.
Aye.
Yeah,
How are
who
you?
else have we got? Let me look. I'll have a list here somewhere. Chisholm, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm doing great. And you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. David and David. David Gordon, hello.
Morning, all.
Morning, morning. And David Isola, hello.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Where are you joining us from, David?
Dublin.
London, wonderful. So it's a very international audience. We've got, Alex, where are you now? You're in
Riyadh.
wonderful. Ken, hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hi,
Thank you
how
for
are
the
you?
invite. Right.
And who else? Ibrahim, good morning. Right. We might have others join us as we go. I am. Right. Let's find the right bit to make a start. Okay. Well, look, thanks all for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. For those who I don't know intimately, my name is Chris Dreyfus Gibson. I run DG Advisory Global. We specialise and focus entirely on control rooms, command centres, operation centres, whatever you would like to call them in your part of the world, and helping to make them better, whatever that means for you. And part of what we do is audit control room operations or setups. And one of the areas that we find very, very frequently is lacking is strategy. And so I thought it might be helpful just to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about strategic clarity and what that really means. And when we talk to control room leaders as part of our audits, and we interview the whole range from the operator all the way up to director level, we often find that directors, exec teams are looking at a nice dashboard of KPIs that invariably is all green, and they're thinking, this is great, we've got everything in hand, it's all working. And then when you ask questions like, what does your control room do? You get this wide variety of responses from, we just do monitoring, all the way through to whatever it might be at an operational level. And what that really indicates is there's very little strategic clarity. We don't understand what this capability is there to do. And that has consequences. If we don't understand the reason why we have a control room, then all the other decisions that we make behind it around what technology do we need, how many people, what sort of people, what should they be doing, can I measure performance properly, are very difficult to answer. So I thought it might be helpful just to delve into that particular subject a little bit. For those of you who follow sort of me on LinkedIn and sort of read what I write, I often talk about mature control rooms or control room maturity. So before we go too deep into strategy, I'd like to just define what we mean by a mature control room and an immature control room, for want of a better word, or a control room that is still developing. And we'll look at sort of maybe five lenses. The first is this idea that control rooms have evolved rather than being designed. And what do we mean by that? Well, if you imagine, and we work generally with security, safety type control rooms, but if you imagine, you've started your control room, you're looking at CCTV, you've got some monitors and some screens, and there we go, we're off. And then over time, we're adding other bits. We think, oh, well, actually, we've got some alarms here, so we're going to add some alarms in. Okay, great. And we're going to add another site, so we're just going to add another site in. And now we're going to make this 24/7 because we should make it 24/7. And because control rooms tend to be one of the few 24/7 bits of an organization, we're going to add other little things to it that need to be monitored 24/7. When I go to clients, a lot of them, it's keys, right? The control room is going to issue keys because we don't know who else is going to do it because no one else is 24/7. So we're going to issue keys. And if you're issuing keys, why don't you also issue permits for contractors? And now we have this whole reception area type of work. And suddenly we've evolved this beast of a capability that is quite far away from the control room we had imagined in our head, right? Now contrast that to designing deliberate design of control rooms, which is about really understanding what do we want it to do, and if we want it to do these 3, 4, 5 things, then we are going to ensure that it has these capabilities to be able to do it. And importantly, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we're going to exclude other things that are not part of our design, right? And when we've understood the mission, making choices around design like technology, the environment and the ergonomics of the room, how many people we should have, what shifts they should be working, how do we train them, all that is design. Those questions become a lot easier because we've got this sort of clarity. The other thing that we see is around purpose, and it's quite related. But we assume we know the purpose of control rooms when they've evolved. And as I said, when we interview control room leaders and exec teams and boards that have responsibility for control rooms, they'll say, I know what my control room does, it does this. You go and talk to the operator and they're doing something completely different, right? Because this thing has just emerged and we haven't been purposeful. And so what I'll talk about a little bit later is strategic requirements, right? Do we understand the strategic requirement, the need, the mission for this control room? And when in mature control room, we see this really well defined. Not just defined, it's written down. And if it's written down, we can cross-check against it. Are we doing what we're doing? And when somebody says, but you're 24/7, you should look after keys, whatever it might be, then we can go back to the strategic requirement and say, actually, no, because the board, somebody, whoever, has agreed that this is our strategic requirement, and therefore what you're asking us to do doesn't fit within that. What that leads to is boundaries that are very fluid and very difficult then for control rooms that are in this developing stage to say no, because we haven't really got very good documentation. We haven't thought about what is it that we want this entity to do. And if we haven't done that, documented it, and everybody has agreed, then where do we end up? We end up with just adding and piling on things. as opposed to very clear boundaries that are defined, that are agreed, that we know where they are. We can say yes, we can say no, and importantly, we can hand off operationally. We can hand off work to other departments that don't sit in the control room. A really good example of this is engineering. We work a lot with museums and universities and those sorts of organisations. Number one incident dealt with by the control room: lift entrapments, people stuck in lifts. Okay, now, yes, that might come through to a control room as an alarm, as an alert, but resolving that doesn't sit with the control room. It sits with engineering, facilities, or estates, or whoever. And therefore, really understanding the boundary: when do I hand work over, what sits with the control room to sort out, versus we've taken a response and we're going to pass it on somewhere else. The other difference that we see is what I sort of say is the posture of the control room. Control rooms that evolve over time, that aren't really thought out, tend to be reactive. Right? We'll respond to something when it happens. So an alarm goes off, we'll deal with it. But once an incident has started, it's almost too late. Right? It's already there. It's on your lap. You have to try and catch up to resolve it. Now, we can't have 100% no incidents. That's extremely rare. But what we see in more mature control rooms is this proactive nature. We are here not just to manage incidents when they occur, but we're here to manage risk. And if we're here to manage risk, we want risk to be prevented. And by preventing risk, in order to prevent risk, we need to be proactive. Right? And what does that mean in a control room? It means that we are finding things before they become problems. It means that we're looking at all the different alarms and the signals and data that's coming in, and we're anticipating, and we're taking action at that point rather than waiting for something to happen. And invariably, once it happens, is say you're playing catch up. So because we've designed, because we're really clear on our requirements strategically, because we've got very clear boundaries, we've got the room to be proactive because we're not distracted by everything else. And the last bit is about what we're monitoring. Excuse my very poor handwriting. In immature control rooms, what we're looking at, this KPI green dashboard sort of that I described at the beginning, we're looking at performance data. How many incidents did we have? How quickly did we answer the phone? What's the backlog of alarms that we've got? Things that are churned out by the systems that we've already got. Those are important things to monitor. We should absolutely look at those because you want to, respond to incidents in a good amount of time. What that doesn't tell you is whether structurally your control room is sound, whether structurally your control room is performing, whether your strategic outcomes are being met. Okay, and you can't measure strategic outcomes if you don't have a strategy, right? If you haven't thought about what do we want this control room to deliver for the organization in the management of risk, because that is really what control rooms should be there to do. If we haven't defined that, then we can't measure strategic outcome because we don't know what they are. And so we end up relying on the things that we measure by default around numbers of incidents and alarms and things like that. And so as an example, I'll give you one client that we've done some work with. One of the things that they wanted out of the work we were doing together, say, I want to reduce the number of alarms. Okay. How many alarms have you got now? I can tell you. How many should you have? Don't really know because we haven't really thought about that, right? Reducing the number of alarms in itself, yeah, that's important. But what is the strategic outcome? The strategic outcome is really something around we're wanting to keep our people and buildings and assets safe, right? And how are we going to do that? Well, let's work backwards. We're going to do that by being proactive. And if we're proactive, we're going to reduce the number of alarms because we've spotted the thing before the alarm goes off. Very recent example, and fortunately, we're not working with them. But if you've seen the news around the Louvre in Paris and the burglary at the Louvre, well, that is a great case study for proactivity. Now, they have other issues around placement of cameras and that sort of thing. But I'll say this because I'm half French, so I'm allowed to say this. We don't work on a Sunday, right? So this burglary happened on Sunday. On a Sunday, you do not have people going up, cherry picker ladders, repairing things, unless it's quite an emergency. That is something unusual. If it's something unusual and I'm being proactive, I pick it out and I think, what's this? Let's go and investigate it. Let's go and prevent this thing becoming an incident by interacting over it. As there are other parts of that incident that are not to do with the control room, but understanding strategy means that we can design. It means that we can activate action. It means we can be proactive. It means we can measure the right things to give assurance to the people right at the top who want to say, is my organisation safe? Am I keeping people, property, assets. So when I talk about mature control rooms, that's really what I'm describing in So let's talk a little bit about strategy then in more detail. I've mentioned this evolution of what happens, where I start with monitoring alarms. I'm then going to add some CCTV. Then we're growing, so I'm going to add some more staff in, and then we become 24/7. And because we're 24/7, we go, we'll look after the keys, do a bit of reception work because there's nobody else to do that. And suddenly, what should have been well thought through has just evolved over time. And what we've developed is really this implicit strategy, people sort of thinking they know what the strategy is, but it's not really written down, and we're not quite sure what it is. So when we talk to the director, they think that we're doing this proactive risk management. When we talk to the control room manager, they're saying, "Oh, but actually we're here just to do response coordination." And then when we speak to the operators, they're saying, "Oh, well, I just monitor and escalate." And no one really has this clarity because we've evolved over time, we've built over time. Things aren't written down because of that. And when we look at behind the scenes, and it's one of the privileges that I have to go into all these different types of control rooms, we see really lots of mess. And again, a good indicator of this is technology. So if you look behind your consoles, if you look behind your control room desks, what's the wiring like? Right? Do you have cables all over the floor, going all over the place, invariably covered with dust, right? That are linked to screens that have been added over time because, well, we just needed one more screen for the extra CCTV. And all this cabling is just being left. And that's a really good indicator of this additive way of doing things where, because we've needed one more thing, we've needed one more system, etc., we haven't taken the time to go back to the beginning and redesign. One of the things that I try and get clients to also is to say, right, you want to change your technology, that's fine. You want to do this extra service, that's fine. But now come back to the beginning. Think about your operating model. For me, our philosophy is the operating model is the key. Right? And whatever change we're going to do, we're going to come back to the operating model and say, well, is this still right for us? And if we want to add this service, how does that change the way that we operate, how we deliver the service, things that we need to support us in delivering the services that control room is concerned. An example of this, the trend at the moment is consolidation. So I've got lots of little control rooms in lots of buildings or different sites or across countries, and now I want to consolidate them into something central. If I'm doing that, I'm changing the way that I function. If I change the way that I function, all the bits around it need to change as well. So I need to do that in a really coordinated, deliberate design right? Rather than having this sort of additive. So if we take this approach, what does that mean? We end up with 3 gaps that are important if we are managing and governing control. And the first is really that it's ungovernable. Because if we haven't got a strategy to compare things against, how do we know things are going wrong? If we haven't got a strategy that talks about the strategic outcomes that we want, how do we measure strategic performance? If we don't have all of this thought through and written down, when I want to add in technology, or I want to add a new service, or I want to bring on another site that I am monitoring through this control room, how do I know I'm plugging something into a really stable operation with a lower risk of breaking it when I bring in set number 2, 3, 4, 5? The other thing that this gap creates is it stops us being proactive. Because proactivity requires thought. It requires us to plan ahead. It requires us to know what the mission is and cascade that mission all the way down to operators who are really clear about what they're there to do. And it might be monitoring. That might very well be your approach. But often we find operators are doing that. They're to the monitoring incident happens to escalate. Whereas the people at the top are thinking that something different is happening. Right? So we need to make sure everybody is aligned. And if everybody is aligned, then we can be proactive, that is about prevention, early detection, and properly managing the risk rather than just responding to the things that can happen. And the third gap that this creates is about investment. You're all in organizations that I'm sure have very clear procedures for how to make financial investment, the need for a business case, for example, and the need to justify spending. When I go to the exec team or to the board and say, I would like this new system, or we need this AI tool to do whatever, if I've not got this really clear strategy at the start, how do I justify that spend? How do I show that the money I'm spending, not to pick technology, but it could be in a new video, it could be in revamping the environment, the ergonomics of the room, but also new operators, a additional operator. How do I make that justification? I've got nothing to compare it against. We've got nothing where I can come back to and say, look, this is the mission you've set us, that you agreed. Here's the strategy that you agreed. In order for me, at this point in time, to deliver that strategy, I need these things. And once I have these things, I can show you the benefits that that's going to bring, and I can bring that back to the strategic outcomes. So we've got 3 gaps here by simply not having a really explicit strategy that everybody agreed to. How do we do this? Before I go into the detail of how we do the strategy, I want to cover the framework that we use, because everything in a control room is everything's covered. And therefore, you have to look at a control room in a very holistic way. We use this model for everything. We use it for the audits that we do. So when we audit all of these elements. There's no point just looking at technology, because technology relates to people, so you have to look at people. People are linked to culture, so you have to look at culture. The environment that people work in impacts both the operations and how they perform. So we have to look at this very holistic view of control. And so when we're building and designing control rooms, this model helps us do that. It helps us do that in a holistic way. That means that we've considered all the different bits that are connected, and therefore we haven't got gaps that are going to emerge in our design. So let's just go through these, and I'll sort of tell you what these little bubbles mean. Let's talk people first. Technology is great, right? But actually controlling is all of that. technology can support decision making, but ultimately it's the people in the room that are making the decisions. It's them that are very often, especially in technology support, are connecting different signals together with alarm, something to me, etc. And we want them to be recruited, trained. We want to retain them so that we don't have this constant churn. And we see this very often in control rooms where it's a third party who is operating the control room. So sort of very sort of security man guarding. We do see quite a high churn because we haven't invested in training, we haven't invested in retention mechanisms, the margins on these contracts are very small. So recruitment. Being a control room operator is not for everybody. We want good control room operators that are taking this proactive approach, that are curious about what's happening, that are invested in the mission. It is not a job for everybody. And again, we will see different models of people that will have people that are one day on security guard in the door, next day I've been told to go to the control room. Okay, being a control room operator is a specialist job that you should be selected for and trained for. And probably talk about training in a separate session and selection of separate session. Often what we see, CV interview, have you done this job before? Yes, is it on CV? Fantastic. Come for an interview. You see the person come take a position. Doesn't tell me anything about whether they've got competencies or capabilities to do that job. Just because you've done it before doesn't mean you did it well, for example. So we need to really think about all of these things. How do we train? How do we recruit, train, retain people? A large part of retention is culture. But what is the culture within our control room? Recognizing that the control room is very often a very small part of a very big operation, often within a big security department, and then that department being within a wider organization. But departments have subcultures. So what is the culture in our control? One of the key points that we look for in culture is psychological safety. Control rooms are safety critical operations. Like when they're looking after the safety and security of your people, your assets, your buildings, it is a safety critical place. We want a culture where people feel comfortable raising things that are not right. Whether that is, I've spotted something and I think this needs investigating, can we dig into it a bit further? Or I'm in the middle of managing an incident and I've noticed something is not right. Somebody has done something in the wrong way. Or if we do this, I think we're going to end up in the wrong place. So this psychological safety is really the ability for people to speak up without the fear of repercussions on them, to be ridiculed and laughed at. And we see it a lot in aviation, in surgical settings, really important in the environment has a big impact on performance. So we all want to come to work and be in a nice environment to work in. That's a given. But more scientifically, the setup that I have at my console, at my desk, the chair that I'm sitting in, where my monitors are placed, how everything interacts, and in relation to the work I'm being asked to do, all of those things impact on performance. They impact on my ability to concentrate and to focus, on the onset of fatigue and how quickly fatigue can take over. It impacts on whether I'm able to observe things correctly. And so all little elements such as we've been to control rooms where you've got big servers at the back. Because the technology needs a server, right? So where do I put it? I'm going to put it at the back of the controller. Servers generate two things: noise and heat, right? So I've got the noise going on in the background and I'm trying to concentrate on what's happening within my screen or looking at and dealing with alarms or whatever it is that I'm doing. I've then got the heat that's being generated by the servers. And if I've got a big video wall, if you've ever stood close to a video wall, they give off heat. Right? So I've got heat coming from the back, heat coming from the front. What do I do to reduce heat? I put in ventilation and air conditioning. So put in air conditioning and ventilation. What does air conditioning do? It's really noisy. Right, so now I've got the noise from the server, the noise from the air conditioning. But this is not for any malice, right? We need these things, but it's just poor design. And in a noisy environment, I can't focus, I can't concentrate, therefore I miss things, and therefore I'm not full. Right, so everything is connected. Operations is about how you deliver the service, right? So we've got SOPs, and what we'll often find is controlling is that have hundreds and hundreds of SOPs. Sometimes they're electronic, sometimes they're in a folder on the shelf, like a physical folder. So something happens, I go to the folder, I open the folder, go to try and find the one that relates to the incident I'm dealing with. By this time, 5 minutes have gone by because I couldn't find the folder or the right page, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Where we try to get clients to is to think slightly differently. Yes, you need procedures. You need to know that if this happens, these are the things that we need to do. But this is where it's all linked. If I have really well-trained operators that I trust to think for themselves, I don't need hundreds of SOPs. I need a thinking framework, a framework for managing incidents, for thinking about the way that we make decisions, and making sure I've brought in all the elements from the situational awareness that I've got on. I don't need hundreds of SOPs. I need to know that if there's this particular incident, here are some things that I need to understand and think about technologically. The reading through an SOP in the heat of an incident never works. So when you think about how we design operations, technology should support all of these things. Okay, but what do we find? We find silo technology, CCTV here, alarms here, building monitoring system here, something else over there. Fire panels are a great example, especially in older control rooms. The fire panels on the wall, because that's just how they've been built over time, and I haven't swapped it out. So I'm sat at my desk. If a fire panel happens, I need to run across the other side of the room to look at the fire panel, figure out what it is, run back to my desk to go and do what I need to do to log it. Technology should support. We want integrated technology that presents this single pane of glass to the operator, that does some of the thinking for them, that connects the dots, presents some of that analysis already to them, so that they reduce the time and can make a real decision. Data connected to technology, connected to people, right? I've got data coming out my ears and systems, but what is it telling me? Is it telling me the number of incidents I've got, or is it going to tell me that here's a problem that is emerging that we need to be aware of? So what is my data doing for me in supporting the mission? We know what the mission is. And this is where we come to strategy, which we've been. Right? Strategy is your guiding document, your North Star, your roadmap, whatever you want to call it. It's the thing that helps you design all of the rest. Because all of the rest should support the strategy, the strategic outcomes. What is it that you want this control room to do? Not, well, we're just going to add things as we go and, things evolve. Of course, things evolve. Then come back to the strategy, come back to the operating, come back to being really deliberate in how we get out of things. Right, so what is this strategic requirement that I talk about? What does it define? How we do it? It's going to answer three things. First of all, what's the mission? What is it that we want you to do? A mission really is about services, I guess. When we come to do operating model design, we translate that into services. What is it really explicitly that you want this capability of yours to do? Is it monitoring CCTV? Yes or no? Is it monitoring it proactively or reactively? So do I look at CCTV only when something has happened? Or am I here doing a very traditional sense CCTV controls? Or do I need AI to help me? But am I being proactive or reactive in my CCTV? Am I looking at alarms? What am I doing? Am I also in charge of the barrier at the car park? So the mission is a big statement. You can have it printed on your wall if you want, but it's this global statement of what is to do with transport services. The other bit then is about outcomes. What are the strategic outcomes? Could be about safety of assets, could be about well-coordinated incidents when they happen, could be about all sorts of things. These two are related. But we want to define those outcomes because those outcomes allow us to then measure performance in the right way, not just the stuff that's churned out the systems, but really understanding strategic performance. Am I meeting these outcomes? When I have an incident, has it been dealt with in a way that brings me to this one of these strategic elements? And then the last question that we sort of try and answer in the strategic requirement is boundaries. Where does the line around my control capability stop? And where does something become then the problem, the responsibility of a different department? Why is that important? That's important because the control room can't do everything. Right? But it's also important because, and these are here, in order to recruit people, I need to know the type of people I want to recruit. In order to train them, I need to know what am I training them to do. Am I training them to unlock a lift because somebody's been trapped? Or am I training them to identify and manage incidents, regardless of what that incident is, and be able to escalate in the right way or pass the handover to the department, and still coordinating the intervention? If I don't know what those boundaries are, how do I know which systems need to plug into my control? Right? Am I taking building management information? And some of that might be useful to the services I'm delivering, but some of it might not be. Or it might not be at all, because that's to do with facilities engineering. So when we build a strategic deployment, those are the three big sort of topics that we're looking to. The way we do this, very good consultant, we start with a discovery. So we want to understand what happens now, right? Because what happens now will help you to understand where you want to go. What are you doing now that's really good that you want to continue doing? What are you doing now that you maybe want to stop doing or exclude? Let's say that all the times it ends up being keys. Especially now we've got very good key cabinetry technology, right? But keys essentially this thing. So we always stop doing something. We've got to be very explicit about that. We have to tell people, we have to talk to stakeholders and say, well, we're not doing this thing, but we need to design some sort of capability that's going to continue doing that service if you're not. So discovery helps you understand what's good about what you do now. What should you stop doing? But also, when it comes to the change bit right at the end, because no point doing this work if you're then not going to change, it helps us to figure out how we're going to change. So how do we transition from the current to the new? And that's important to think about really, really early. We then have a strategy workshop, really a conversation that's going to go through these three areas. People can do it in different ways. You'll have your ways to do it. The way that we do it, we have a game. We've developed a game, card game, that allows people to, for those that know Top Trumps, it's a universal game, but a bit like Top Trumps. So essentially, it's a card game that says, well, here are a load of services, what we're going to keep and we're going to take out. And then from that, we have the mission, the outcomes. The crucial part of this work is having some sort of approval. Whatever you come out with needs to be agreed as high a level as you can. This is an organizational strategy. It should link with whatever your risk, your security strategy is, whatever that organization. Because the control room is there to support risk management. So the two should link together. But your approval should be important, really, ideally, whatever that looks like in the organization. Because once it's approved, that means that everybody has agreed. And so when somebody comes and says, oh, you're 24/7, you're the control room, that's fine, this should sit in control room, we can go back to that and say, no, the board didn't agree with it. Here's our strategy. It's agreed. All of this is excluded. And it might be explicitly said when we do boundaries and say, here's a list of things we are not doing. Okay? And if we want to change that, we go back to the board. It's important we make this. Then we need to understand how we change. How do we go from what we've got now, this reactive capability that's that's designed to be sort of emerged over time with technology that's a bit all over the place, people that aren't sure what they're meant to be doing. How do we change from that to something that is properly designed, that is deliberate, that has people that are recruited and trained to do the mission that we have targeted, where we've got technology that is designed to work with people and work together to deliver on support mission, where we understand the data and have data with supporting systems. So those are steps. And these are things you can do yourself. I'm not saying you have to hire us but I'm giving you this because you can go away and work on this for your organisation. I'd love to walk into a nicely designed control room once you've done it. So before we finish, I guess and we'll open to questions. Talk about this and anything else. Control room later. After this webinar, I'm going to send you 3 things that hopefully will help you. We audit control rooms, but that's you hiring us to do depth of the work. But we developed a self-audit tool, so we'll send that to you. It probably takes about 15 minutes. It covers all of the 7 pillars that we had here. So there's questions on all of these pillars that will help you figure out where is your control room now. Okay, doesn't give you a score, but the questions help you sort of zoom in on the areas that perhaps are less mature than others, so that when you're going through this, and I always say start with strategy. So if the self-audit says you've got a technology problem, that's fine, but start with strategy, because you can't pick technology if you don't know what the strategy is and what it's there to help you. But it'll give you an idea of the areas that we need to concentrate on. I'll send you the 7 pillars. We've got a little sort of guidebook that goes into the 7 pillars for more detail. That just means that when you're answering the questions, you kind of know the sort of spin the audit is trying to give to those questions. But it also means when you come to do your strategy, you can go through and sort of address each of the answers. And I'll send you our little sort of brochure on the maturity audit. Love to work with you and the audit, but also it gives you a little bit more detail about what we do. So if you want to do it yourself, that's absolutely fine. Right? Go and do it and do more in-depth audit across those 7 pillars. The same things we do. We go and we observe, so we sit in control rooms, we look at what the operators are doing, we sort of understand what's going on, we review the environment, we interview everybody at the level, and we look at data. So obviously the data out. But again, so you can do that for myself. So right. I don't think I have anything else to say about strategy so really an opportunity if you have any questions, very happy to answer those in 10 or so minutes. So the floor really is yours. Yes, Alex.
Thanks, Chris. Really informative input. Thank you. Just going back to your 7 pillars, you obviously have strategy as one of your sort of key pillars. So obviously, I take that strategy is about the sort of the constitution, if you like, of the control room. Because what I'm thinking is the operations, strategic operations, but that would be more about response. So if you think, obviously, in our old job, strategy, strategic response, tactical, operational type stuff. And I take it that's separate. That's more under the operations umbrella as opposed to the strategy pillar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use old words just and explain just further. So I think Alex wanted to talk about his gold, silver, bronze.
That's correct.
So that the structure we might put in place, structure we very good emergency services for response to incidents. So here's the command structure, strategy, goal, somebody setting the strategy for that incident response. And somebody who's then going to think about the operations of somebody's going to do the thing. That's not what we're talking about here in the international. What we're talking about here is really the foundation of your institution. That's a really good way to describe it. It's your founding document, to the US term. But it's the document that will define what is the mission of the control room, what is it that we're here to do for the organisation. It should link in, as I said, with your risk strategy, security strategy, whatever document guide your wider management, security and safety risk, to be able to control the system. And then it's about saying, here's what's in, here's what's in. And if we do all that, what is the outcome? What are the things that we are expecting from the control room strategically? What are the things we're expecting the control room to deliver for us? So yeah, it's a very much the base document. Put it in as one of the pillars. I mean, it's probably the foundation, which but it is, you do that once, right? But there's the others, everything's connected. All the other 6 things are require you to know what that strategic means.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's almost like your sort of purpose, which is obviously one of your points, is your purpose then defines the strategic purpose of the room. And then, of course, your people bit that then will then determine the sort of level of training and what the roles and responsibilities are of the people sitting in that room, whether they do operate, you say, at gold, silver, or bronze level as well, then, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And as I said, everything's linked, right? So
yes,
I'm recruiting people, right? What am I recruiting today? So how do I select them? What job is it to do? How do I train them?
Yeah.
You will invariably have some sort of grade structure and control, supervisors, something like that. So is my training different? Is what I'm asking them, empowering them to do decisions and preparing to make different operations. Yeah, because that's it. If I have an incident, define level of incident, right? If I have an incident, what is the structure that gets put in place in the organisation to manage that incident? How does the control room put in? Is the control room, is the control room supervisor manager the first person in charge whenever something happens? In other places, the control room is never in charge. It's always a supporting function of an operational duty manager that takes over sort of its responsibility.
Yeah.
So the models can vary, but you need to be explicit about it. Certain standards where they sit. When we do operator training, operator sports, we talk about the changing role of control. So you might start as being in command of the incident, but as the incident evolves and I've got better structure put in place, maybe it's something that's dragging on for a bit, we've got the commander in C, not somebody who's going to be in charge of C, then actually the control room morphs into something that's more supporting. You're gathering information and analysis and communication, nationwide. So things change as it's evolved in time. But that's it in the operations. It's about being explicit, divided, and deliberate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And I will not hold you back from the day full of meetings. You've had it. Thank you all very much. Do pick up after if you sort of feel that you want to have more of a one-to-one discussion about your particular setup. Thank you so much for joining me, and probably the next one will be the next month sometime. I'm not sure what we're going to discuss then, but if you're also on LinkedIn, probably
Thanks so much, Chris.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Good seeing you again. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.